found so many of my most favorite books or top tier 5-star books just from recommendations that I've seen on Bookstagram or BookTok. The hype around a certain book can sometimes feel so overwhelming where it literally feels like you can't escape it no matter what you're looking at or what algorithm you are deep in the trenches of. And a lot of the times my reaction to the hype is to figure out if that book is actually worth it. I never really go into reading a hyped up book thinking that it's going to reach the hype. I try to maintain expectations as best as I can to be relatively neutral so that whether it is better than or less than everybody says it's going to be, I am still able to sort of form my own opinion myself. That being said, even though I have found a lot of books that I love from the hype of the internet, I have found even more books that are just not worth the hype that they are getting. So today I'm going to be talking about 5 very popular books that, in my opinion, are not worth the hype. But first, I quickly want to talk about today's sponsor of this video, which is Skillshare. I am truly so excited to be partnering up with Skillshare once again because they really are a platform that I personally use and have used for years. I think the first Skillshare class I ever took was in 2014, over 10 years ago, and it was a calligraphy course that I took just because I wanted to pick up a new hobby. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives. They are literally designed by creatives and experts in their fields for creatives who are looking to learn a new skill or develop a new hobby. They have so many classes covering a wide breadth of topics such as illustration, photo or video editing, graphic design, watercolor, calligraphy, crocheting, whatever you may be interested in, there is a class for that. I've used Skillshare for my personal interests as I've been looking to maybe dive deep into a new hobby, but I've also used it professionally as I've pushed myself to get better at certain things that will help out with this very YouTube channel, like photo editing or creating thumbnails. One of my favorite creators on Skillshare is Carrie Cakes. I've taken both of her classes, From Mess to Success, Essential Organization for YouTube, and Romanticizing Your Life, A Beginner's Guide to Creating Vlogs for YouTube. She has such great tips and tricks for vlogging and growing an organized YouTube channel, and it's been so helpful for me as a small creator. Now that we're in the full swing of spring and summer is very quickly approaching, I feel like this is the perfect time to pick up a new hobby or develop a new skill that you've been interested in, but maybe have not found the resources to help you with, or you just don't know where to start. Skillshare is a great launching pad for that. Skillshare was also kind enough to give me a special offer for you guys today. So the first 500 people to click the link in my description will receive a free 1-month trial of Skillshare. I highly recommend that you join Skillshare, get that free trial, test out some classes, start developing a new skill or learning a new hobby. I really don't think that you're going to regret it. So definitely take advantage of that offer. And of course, thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Now let's dive right into 5 very popular books that I personally think are overhyped. As a disclaimer, if you liked these books, I think that is great for you. I am not saying that this is the objective, be-all, end-all opinion of all book readers everywhere. This is just my personal opinion. I did not think that these books lived up to the hype that they were getting. And the first one that I want to talk about is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. So this follows our main character, Millie, who at the start of this book has recently been released from prison. I think she was in prison for like 10 years once we meet her. At this point in her life, she is super down on her luck. She's living out of her car. She just has no job, no prospects, no money, and she's just having a hard time right now. However, somehow she gets an interview with this very wealthy family named the Winchester family. I don't even remember how she gets to interview with them, but she goes to their house. It seems like it's the perfect opportunity to be this housekeeper, housemaid, nanny type person who just kind of keeps the house in order and makes sure that things are in their right place. So she has this interview with the wife, whose name is Nina, and everything goes really well, and Millie ends up getting the job. So she moves into this house and becomes the housemaid for the Winchester family. Even though the interview seemed amazing for Millie and Nina seemed like she would be a great boss and just a great person to work for, all of a sudden the vibe is very different when Millie gets to the house, and Nina is kind of psycho crazy, and the house is super weird, and she's living up in this attic area, and even though the house is super nice, they have a great guest bedroom, they're giving her basically a broom closet to sleep in. So Millie is kind of like, what the heck just happened? This is not exactly what I was expecting, but she feels trapped in this job because she has zero money and again, zero prospects, and she really needs to make money. So she's kind of just like, stick it out, get a couple paychecks, and then you can leave when the time is right. Working for the Winchester family, working for Nina becomes absolute hell on earth. Millie starts to realize that there's a lot going on under the surface that was not immediately clear to her in the beginning, and she feels like a little bit duped in this. So the family, Nina and her husband, and they have a little girl as well, they obviously have a lot of stuff going on, a very twisted dynamic, but there's a lot of secrets as well that Millie is kind of trying to figure out. At the same time, Millie also has a ton of secrets. Like I said, in the very beginning of the book, we're told that she is released from prison. It's kind of like a weird tension between all of them because nobody really knows how much the other person knows and how much you should be saying at that time. And again, the behavior of Nina specifically just gets more psychotic and more manic and erratic. Millie is trying to figure out why and just kind of trying to survive and again get a paycheck. So this whole premise of the book was very interesting to me, and I knew it was going to be a fast read. I knew it was going to be like really intense, just kind of like a popcorn style binge worthy book where maybe it's not the best thing you've ever read, but like it's very exciting and I'm fully in it. I gotta tell you, man, I just think this was not a good book at all. I think that the writing style was extremely mediocre in a lot of ways. I think that our main character Millie was highly unlikable, and I don't even really think that we're supposed to like her. I think we're supposed to dislike her, but it wasn't even a good relationship between reader main character. It was just like, I dislike you so much that I don't care what happens to you, and a lot of that has to do with the way that she was written. I just really didn't enjoy it. She seemed super immature, super petty, but the descriptions that Frida McFadden is saying about her, she's really smart and really intelligent and knows what needs to be done, but then you actually see her act and you're like, oh my gosh, you are the dumbest person I have ever come across. It was so frustrating. The whole conclusion of the book as well, the twist at the end, it didn't even feel like that big of a twist or that big of a reveal. It felt weirdly predictable, but then again, the way that it's written at the end, Frida McFadden's like, ha, gotcha, bet you didn't see that one coming, and you're just kind of like, I did see that coming. I was feeling that the entire time. Typically, I am not somebody that is obsessing over the ending or a twist of a mystery book. I don't really need to try to figure it out. I kind of just want to be along for the ride and be surprised by the twist at the end. I just don't necessarily feel that level of satisfaction from figuring it out like some people do. So I don't try to, but this one, you couldn't not try to. It was very predictable. The vibes just told you exactly what was going to happen in the end. So then when the end did happen and it was this big giant reveal, it was just kind of falling flat for me. Another thing I didn't like about it was that it felt very unrealistic. Now, to be fair, it's a fiction book. It can feel unrealistic. It's supposed to feel unrealistic. These things wouldn't happen in real life because it's fiction, but it just kind of crossed the line into being very over the top dramatic, very over the top unrealistic, and it was so bad that it kind of took me out of the story itself, because the whole time I was just thinking, this is not how this would go down. This is not at all how these things would happen. And again, it's fiction, and that's okay in a lot of instances, but this was so over the top that it disconnected me from the story itself. I kind of mentioned it before, but I think all of the characters were just super flat, either flat and dull and boring or extremely unlikable. So there was nobody that I was even rooting for at the end of the book, and I really need an anchor for me. I need my character anchor in the story, somebody to root for, somebody to like even a little bit, and I just didn't have this at all, which kind of translated into me not caring in the slightest. The writing style was also a pretty big issue for me. I think the writing style was overly simplistic and super repetitive. Repetitive in a way that doesn't emphasize something. It just is, again, I feel like I've said this word a lot, but it just kind of felt annoying and unnecessary. There was no depth, there was no nuance. I would say it's a very accessible writing style, which is good. In a positive way, it added to the ability to read this book super fast. This was not a book that I spent a week reading. I think I finished it in a day or two, and a lot of that has to do with the writing style and just the extreme nature of what was going on. But if I really look at it, there's nothing that stuck with me. There's nothing that hit home for me. It was just kind of base level, simplistic, saying exactly what's happening with no description, nothing to allow the reader's imagination to form its own thoughts or opinions. I just don't think there was very good storytelling. And with the writing style issues, I think that the pacing of the book really did not work as well. The first half was super slow. The exposition just took so long, where it was one of those things where the main character, because it's first person, which is I think one of the reasons why it didn't work for me, it's first person, and so you hear the thoughts of the main character and they're always asking questions and they're always being like, huh, that's weird, and not actually coming to any conclusions on their own. And that just went on for so long that the first 2/3 of the book felt very slow. Like we're being held in this tension on the edge of something for so long, and I really didn't like that. And then the back half, the back like 1/3, maybe even back quarter of the book was explosive in the worst way possible. The graphic detail that Frida McFadden goes into just came out of left field. It felt very unnecessary. I could never come up with some of the things that happened to these characters. It was not something I enjoyed at all. I think people probably describe this book as a quick and entertaining read, and maybe I am also describing it that way. It's definitely quick, and it is entertaining enough to keep you hooked where you have to find out what happens in the end. But once you get to the end of the book, I just honestly regretted reading it. I regretted the experience that I had reading it, but I'm also glad that I read it, because now every time I see people talking about how amazing this book is, and the series, there's multiple books in this series. Why? When I see people talking about how good it is, I know not to trust their opinion. Thanks. Okay, moving on. The next book that I want to talk about is one that I've actually talked about before, but I was reminded of it because I was recently talking with my friend who had a bunch of books recommended to her, and one of the books was this one, The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I read this last summer. I was really in the mood for a quick romantic beach read type thing, and this was a book of the month pick, and I just kind of thought that it might be fun. I think that there are two types of romance books that I gravitate to. One is like a good, deep romance book that the characters are really thought out, really well developed, the plot is wonderful, and it's just like a character story. And then there's other romance books that I gravitate to that's just like, hey, I need to finish a book right now, maybe I'm in a reading slump, I need something quick and happy and light. And while it may not be the best book in the world, it was exactly what you needed to read at that time. I thought that this book would fall into this category, that it would just kind of be quick and easy and enjoyable. It was quick and easy, but this was not enjoyable for me at all. So our main characters are Anna Green and Liam Weston, who goes by West in this book, and they both attend the same college. Anna is kind of a no-nonsense art student who is struggling for money because she's an artist, and West comes from a very wealthy, rich, well-off family. And I think the reason that this whole thing starts is because even though his family is super rich, West does not have access to those funds or that trust fund. I think it's because he's maybe studying something different. I don't remember. It's many years since I've read it. Basically, these two characters get secretly married. Not secretly, kind of secretly. They get married legally in order to live in student family housing on campus, because that is way cheaper, but you can't live in student family housing on campus unless you can prove that you're married. So they do that because they both need money. It kind of makes sense that Anna needs money. The whole reason that West needs money is just kind of weird to me. They get married. They live together for a year, and then West graduates, and I don't remember what happens with Anna. But basically, a couple years later, West comes back to Anna. Anna is thinking that they got a divorce. The plan was that they were going to be married, to live in housing together, and then they were going to get the marriage annulled, obviously. West doesn't get the marriage annulled and doesn't tell Anna about it. So she goes years thinking that this fake marriage that she had with this man in college has been annulled and was all just kind of part of this secret pact, not knowing that West didn't annul the marriage like he was going to, which is just a major red flag to me, first off. So West comes back to her and is like, hey, I need you to come to my sister's wedding with me on this remote island in paradise, because my family thinks that I'm married and I need to stay married for a certain amount of years before I get access to my trust fund, and I will pay you $100,000. And Anna's like, great, I need money because my dad is sick and I have to pay for his medical bills, and I'm a poor starving artist. So they go to this island resort in paradise, and wouldn't you know it, they kind of start to like each other and they kind of start to fall in love. And his family is horrible, and Anna has to really remain true to her identity as a poor starving artist and not be turned wealthy and rich and narcissistic like the rest of West's family. And West has to make a decision. Does he want to lay it all on the line for Anna, or does he want to get all of his money? It's kind of typical. It's extremely predictable. It feels like a Hallmark movie, but it's posed to us as if it's this kind of cool, hard-hitting romance that does have a lot of depth and is a very interesting story, and it's just not. It thinks that it is something that it's not, and I think that's my main issue with it. I can get down with the crazy plot lines and the crazy storylines, but I can't get down with you saying that this is one of the best romances of the year or of the past 5 years. The writing style in this was one of my least favorite writing styles that I have ever come across. Once again, this is a first-person book, and the way that it is written, I think I described this the last time I talked about the book, the way that it's written is it feels like I'm reading somebody's somebody's blog or I'm reading a social media caption. There's parentheses inserted at weird times. The author uses texting language like LOL a lot of the time. Just in a normal sentence, it'll just be like a stream of consciousness thought from our main character, and then it'll end the sentence with LOL. And it was so weird and bizarre, and it immediately took me right out of the story. I did not enjoy that at all. I think the main issue for me is the writing style, because again, I can get down with a crazy plot line in a romance book, but I need you to be aware that you're a crazy plot line, and I need you to not pretend that you are something that you're not. It's a very weird way to describe this book, but I don't know, man, there's just something about it. I just don't think that it was very good. I don't think it was very well written, and I think the characters were underdeveloped and not likable once again, and the whole plot line just felt very rushed, not paced well at all. Characters fell in love super fast, and it was just kind of weird. It was just weird, and didn't enjoy it, and I don't understand why people love this book so much. This was so overhyped, and it really underdelivered. So The Paradise Problem is definitely a popular book in my opinion that just does not worth the hype that it gets. All right, let's move on. This is a book that I actually very recently read and finished, and it is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. All right, this book, you guys love this book. Everybody loves this book. I have been on a quest to find good mystery books. I think a lot of you probably know that. If you're new here and you don't know that, I am not really a mystery reader, but I want to be a mystery reader. And every mystery book that I try, I just really don't enjoy, but I am still trying them. And I've seen so many good things about this book. A lot of you actually recommended this to me in the comments sometimes when I ask about mystery books. When I was buying this book at Barnes & Noble, the cashier at the checkout literally said to me that this was her favorite book of all time, and that the twist at the end would blow my mind. And if that is not overhyping a book, I don't know what is. Honestly, I was pretty excited about this. I really hadn't seen a single negative thing about this book, and I thought maybe this could be a mystery that would be very good and exciting for me. I thought that the premise of it felt very Agatha Christie-esque, and I really enjoy Agatha Christie books. So this is kind of taking place with like a dual timeline. There's our present tense, which is in the 1980s, and then we're trying to kind of figure out a mystery that happened in 1929. So our main character's name is Kit. She's kind of like an end-of-life caregiver where she will be assigned a patient who is typically elderly or has some sort of disability, and she will help them in the way that maybe a nurse would help somebody, but she's not an actual registered nurse. She's just a caretaker that has been through the proper training for that. So that is her official job. She's got her own backstory, but the point of the story is that she is assigned as a caregiver for Lenora Hope. Now, Lenora Hope is part of this very, very famous family in Maine, super rich. They live on the cliffs, they have this mansion, and in 1929, it was said that Lenora Hope murdered her entire family when she was 16 or 17, a young little lady. Then was basically never seen again. So what would that be? 50 years later-ish, she's kind of become this folklore of the town. She's this legend where nobody really knows what happened to Lenora Hope. Everybody says that she murdered her family, but she was never charged because it could never be proven, and so she just kind of disappeared, and a lot of people are like, well, does she even exist? Is this story true? There's just lots of speculation, lots of rumors going around, and Kit gets assigned to be Lenora Hope's caregiver. So she shows up at this mansion, this crazy house on a cliff, and Lenora Hope is pretty much totally paralyzed. She's nonverbal, she can't speak, but her mind is active enough where she can communicate by doing 2 taps for yes, 1 tap for no. She can kind of type on her typewriter and communicate with one hand as well, which was kind of interesting. So Kit goes to this house and right away figures out that this house is very spooky. Again, it's on a cliffside, and it's been there on that cliffside for close to 100 years, and apparently the cliffs are eroding and the house is fully tilted and is sliding off of the cliff. So all the time it's described in the book that Kit's like walking down a hallway, but she's sideways as if she's in a boat, which is absolutely terrifying, and I hate the idea of that. So one of the things that was interesting in this is that we kind of have chapter breaks where we're getting the story, and then we break to a chapter that's like Lenora typing on her typewriter and writing her own book that is giving the full story of what happened in 1929, and that happens throughout the entire book. And this is almost 400 pages, so it's pretty long. And that happens immediately, where we are like right into the story. Kit arrives and introduces herself to Lenora, and basically that night, Lenora's like, I want to tell you everything. Doesn't need to gain relationship with Kit, just immediately looks at her and thinks that she can trust her, and then she just starts telling her story of everything that happened that night in 1929 when her entire family died. And basically that's the whole book. where you're just waiting for Lenora to reveal what happened. I thought maybe Kit would be more of a detective type character where she is also trying to uncover these clues to get Lenora's story. And I think maybe she was posed to be that, and maybe the author thinks she was doing that with Kit, but Kit does nothing. Kit does absolutely nothing. The way that I felt about Kit was the way that a lot of people feel about that horror movie trope. I don't watch horror movies because I'm a baby when it comes to that type of stuff, but the trope of watching a character do something really, really dumb and you know they're about to die. Like, don't go in that room. You know there's a murderer in there, but they're just kind of like la-di-da, whatever, there's no murderer. That's how it felt reading about Kit and reading from Kit's perspective. She was very la-di-da, I don't know what's going on. This is super dumb. This seems suspicious, but I'm gonna completely ignore all of these facts and do my own thing over here. And that was highly frustrating. Really disliked it. Once again, this is a book where there was just not a single likable character, and that is really tough for me when reading. I have to have somebody to anchor me, and I just didn't have it in this book, but that's really not my main issue with it. My main issue was the twist that happens at the end. Just the full ending, the full explanation for what happens to these characters. This twist was so hyped up for me, and the thing is it's not one twist. It was one problem that's being presented to the reader where the whole book, you're like, this is what we're trying to solve. This is going to be the reveal. This is what we're trying to figure out. And then all of a sudden you get to the end and like 17 different twists happen. And I think it was supposed to be like a, bet you didn't see that one coming, but it was more like throwing paint at the wall where it felt like the author had all of these ideas for a reveal of what the mystery could be. And she was trying to pick one to be the big reveal and then was just like, you know what, screw it. Let's just do all of them. And none of them really worked together. And some of the twists that were presented, there was just no evidence for at all throughout the rest of the book. And it just felt very overwhelming, super weird, and not clever. It didn't feel like it was written well. It just felt like she was shoving as much as she possibly could down our throats as a reader. And I just really, really disliked that. So I rated this pretty lowly. And again, this just goes to show how hyped up this book is. I had so many people commenting on my Goodreads review being like, I can't believe you didn't like this. This book is amazing. I'm sorry, this book is just not, it's just not. I really didn't like it. There's only one other person that I've met that didn't like it, and it's my sister-in-law who read this book before me, and then when she saw me reading it, she was like, oh, can't wait to see what you think of that. I think I sent her a video of me throwing it in the trash. I didn't actually throw it away. I picked it up. It was just for the bit. This one for sure is just, I'm sorry, it's not it for me. It's very overhyped in my opinion. Okay, these last two books I'm gonna talk about are a little bit different from the first three. The first three, I think they're overhyped, and I actually ended up not liking them at all. But these two books I did like, I just don't think that it is as good as everybody says that they are. These books were described to me as being life-changing. They're absolutely everybody's new favorite books when they read them, and so I kind of went in with very high expectations of like, these are both gonna be 5 stars easily. And they were kind of mediocre. I liked them. I definitely enjoyed them. They definitely had their good moments, but not anywhere near what everybody was saying they were going to be. So the first one is the 7-Year Slip. Now, I have talked about this one as well in the past, but this was also in the list of books that my friend was reading off where the Paradise Problem was in there, and it just kind of like reignited something in me where I feel like I need to talk about it and explain why I think that it is a bit overhyped. So this book follows our main character, Clementine, who is a pretty successful book publisher or book editor or something. And at the beginning of the book, it is made pretty obvious that she is grieving the loss of her aunt who lived in New York, who she was super, super close to. And her aunt recently died, and that has been a very hard thing for Clementine to walk through. So Clementine's aunt actually left her Manhattan apartment. When Clementine moves into this apartment, it is made pretty clear that there are some weird things going on, mainly that this apartment slips in time, precisely 7 years, meaning that the person that is in the apartment can go backward, I think it's only backward, they can go backwards 7 years in time and experience what is happening 7 years ago, but only in the apartment. If they leave the apartment, suddenly they're back in their normal time frame. It's not that you go back in time and then you can walk around New York 7 years ago. It's just in the apartment. So one day, Clementine slips backwards in time and realizes that there is a man in her apartment because 7 years ago there was a man that was living there. So she meets this guy, they're living 7 years apart, and they fall in love and then basically have to figure out how they're going to be together in the future because they are both aware that they are slipping in time, and so they just kind of have to either leave this romance in the apartment and it's just kind of their protected space where this amazing relationship has happened, or they have to figure out, somebody has to wait for somebody and they have to figure out how to find each other 7 years either in Clementine's present tense or this guy's future. And turns out they do find each other in the present tense 7 years later immediately. So we kind of are observing two different relationships. One where Clementine and this guy meet 7 years into the future, and then one where Clementine and this guy are 7 years in the past. It was kind of weird to have those two different timelines going because I think the whole point of this book is that you see these characters go through immense growth and character development between each other but also alone, and I just didn't feel that. I didn't see it. These characters fell really flat for me as well. I liked them, but they just weren't as compelling as I needed them to be when this story is totally a character-driven story. When you have something that's kind of a light on the plot, it needs really, really strong characters who are going to drive the plot forward, and I just don't think that that was happening with these characters, and a lot of the decisions that they were making didn't feel super realistic to what I had been told about them. I'd been given all this information about these characters. I feel like when a character is described well, you should be able to kind of predict how they're going to act or how they're going to respond to certain things, and it felt like the way that they were acting was a lot of times in direct opposition to what I had been told about them. It just felt pretty flat for me. I think that there was not really a good romantic payoff. Again, we're kind of focused on this relationship really, really intensely, and just the way that it ended up, I didn't feel what I think the author wanted me to feel, and so it just felt very mediocre in the end. I honestly think that the time slip and the time travel plot about this was very underutilized. I think that if we had been able to focus more on the time travel, that would have been a very interesting plot mechanism that would disrupt these characters more, but honestly, it was just kind of something that we were told in the beginning of the book and then would randomly experience throughout it, but it wasn't really like a big plot driver, and I think it would have been really cool if it was. The pacing was pretty slow in my opinion, and that coupled with characters that are pretty one-dimensional, pretty flat, just made it a bit of a slower read. Even though this is an easy read and it is pretty short, it just took me a while to get through because I wasn't feeling very invested in it. And the other thing is I think that there was very flowery, maybe overly romantic, overly sentimental prose, but without the depth that it needed to go along with it. Like a beautiful sentence would be written about identity and finding yourself and finding your true love, but because the rest of the book didn't really have that depth in the plot and in the character development, it just was kind of like a pretty sentence and didn't really land for me. Overall, I think that it was enjoyable. I liked it, but it was very underwhelming at the same time. So that's why I think it was overhyped. And then the last book that I'm going to talk about today, again, is one that I liked, but man, this was extremely overhyped in my opinion. And that is The Night and Gale by Kristen Hanna. I am so sorry to many of you who really love this book. This was a tough one for me because I did like it, but I really, really expected to like it more. I said in the beginning of this video that a lot of the times I've learned to kind of keep my expectations in check. Based on what I had seen from this book, I did not keep my expectations in check. I was like, this is going to be an easy 5-star. This is going to be one of my favorite books of the year, and unfortunately it just was not. So this takes place during World War II in Nazi-occupied France, and it follows our two main characters, Vianne and Isabelle. They are sisters that are a couple years apart. Vianne is the older one. Their father fought and survived in World War I, and after that experience really, really did not become a good father afterwards, and kind of ended up sending the girls away because he couldn't take care of them. He had PTSD. He became very unloving and kind of a shell of a man. So these girls, as young girls, are immediately traumatized by father issues. They are sent away to a caretaker to kind of live their lives and grow up without their father. Vianne gets pregnant and marries her true love really, really young. Like, she is a teenager when they get married. And so she kind of lives in this cottage with her husband, and she's raising her young family, and that's really her primary focus and what she's invested in. Isabelle bounces around from different boarding schools and kind of becomes this rebel rebel wild child, or what could be considered a wild child in the 1940s in France. And then World War II happens. Now, Vianne and Isabelle don't really have a good relationship because of everything that's happened in their past. Naturally, there is a lot of strain that goes into building a sisterly relationship around that. This book really focuses on their tension and their relationships, and it takes place over the entire span of World War II. There's many years that we follow these characters, and you kind of see how they develop and change from the beginning of the war to the end of the war, and how their paths diverge, or they kind of cross over, or they become parallel at some times. And I think that is really, really interesting, especially because Vianne and Isabelle face the war and think about the war in really, really different ways, where Vianne is so focused on her daughter and her family. Her husband is a prisoner of war. He's off fighting in war. And Vianne just wants to keep her kid healthy and safe and alive. And she wants to keep her head low, and she doesn't really want to cause a lot of trouble, and she just wants to ride the war out, essentially. Whereas Isabelle, on the flip side, is like, man, I want to fight. I want to join the ranks. I want to help in the war effort. I want to be a rebel. I want to do whatever I can to fight back against the Germans. And of course, Vianne is like, Isabelle, you're going to get yourself killed. You should just keep your head low. Don't cause trouble, and we'll get through this. And Isabelle just can't take that. She can't do it. And so we follow these sisters as they go through the war, and they both kind of find their own individual ways of rebelling against this war and helping in the war effort. Even Vianne specifically, who in the beginning of the book didn't want anything to do with that. She just wanted to comply and, again, just get through the war. Even her, towards the end, she has figured out her own little ways to help in the war effort, to rebel, to stand on her morals and her grounds, whereas Isabelle is doing it very, very outwardly. She kind of becomes like a spy and joins the rebel effort. Vianne is doing it in a lot more of a subtle way, but still extremely impactful. And I loved that. I thought that was super, super interesting. I think a lot of my issues with this book come down to, once again, the writing style. The plot is there, the characters are there. It could have been so good, but I just have a lot of issues with the way that it was written. I think this book leans very heavily into emotional manipulation, which is one of my biggest pet peeves as a reader, where they are pulling every single emotion out of me that they possibly can, but without really earning it, without doing the groundwork and laying the foundation of having real emotions. I'm an emotional person. I'm gonna cry if something sad happens, but the difference is if I get to the end of that cry and be like, wow, that felt really good with everything I was feeling, or I get to the end of it and I'm like, what the heck, you did not deserve my tears. That was emotional manipulation. This book felt like emotional manipulation, where it was just like psychological warfare. All of these things were going wrong, all of these things were happening, and of course, it's Nazi-occupied France. It's a really heavy, intense subject, but just some of the things that were happening with the characters, it's just like, okay, I get it. Can we get on to more of the plot, or are you just going to explain all these bad things that keep happening? I think that's more of a personal preference for me. It's not necessarily objectively good or bad writing. I just really didn't like the emotional manipulation. Another thing that I felt was very weird was the pacing. So this does take place over like 4-ish years, but the pacing felt odd, where we would have a whole chunk of the book that took place over a couple of weeks or maybe a month or two, and then all of a sudden we would jump forward like 2 years, and so much time has gone by, and there's so much missing information in that time period that I would have wanted to have. And then we settle down over 2 years later and we go through like another week or two, and then all of a sudden we jump forward 6 months, and it just felt like the time jumps themselves were very weirdly placed and kind of sporadic, where shorter time spans we spent so much time on, and then we would have these massive jumps and it would all of a sudden move really, really quickly. I kind of wish that the whole timeline had been evened out a bit, where the pacing was more consistent. I think that would have helped me a lot more with my emotional investment as well, because it's kind of hard to jump 2 years in advance, where it almost feels like in a lot of ways you're starting another book. All of a sudden we have to get through all this exposition again of what happened off screen in the time jump, and I didn't love that. I also think that there were actually quite a bit of inconsistencies, specifically spatially and environmentally, where we would be in a scene and Kristen Hanna would describe a character as being over here, like one place. So she's in the bedroom doing something, and then all of this dialogue's happening, and all of a sudden the character just like speaks and announces herself, but it's not explained if this character walked in or if something happened. It's just like almost Kristen Hanna forgot that this character was supposed to be elsewhere and then is all of a sudden right there. And that happened a lot more than I was expecting. The first time it happened, it's kind of just like, maybe I missed something as the reader, maybe that was a little bit weird, and then it just kept happening where it felt felt really inconsistent spatially. It literally felt like Kristen Hanna forgot where she said certain people or certain things were in the environment that we're currently in. Or like the garden of Vianne's cottage. That's another thing that a lot of people actually noticed when I started reading some reviews and reading some things about what other people thought of the book. The garden is described a lot in this book, which I like because it's supposed to be Vianne's safe place. It's supposed to be a very important place for Vianne. So we're in the garden a lot and it's described a lot. But like one scene, we would be absolutely freezing and it's winter and everything is dead. And the very next scene, everything is in bloom and there's like roses on the wall, but the time is the same. It's like the next day or the next week. We're not getting warmer that more quickly, and then it goes back to being cold, and then it's like everything dies again. And it was just hard to get a mental image of everything, to be honest. I needed to be able to wrap my mind around the images, and I wasn't able to picture things. I wasn't able to put myself in the environment or the shoes of the characters because it just felt very inconsistent. And that, again, really took me out of the book and made it hard to engage and feel connected to the characters and the plot and feel emotion. And then when I would feel emotion, it felt like that emotion was stolen from me and it was not earned. So that was kind of hard. And I think those are kind of the main things of what I didn't really like about this book. But again, I did enjoy it. I think I rated it like a 3.75 maybe, which is pretty high for like a historical fiction for me. There's a lot of good things in it. There's a lot of really sad things that happen. I think that Kristen Hanna really did her research. It definitely felt realistic to the war, what was happening then, but I just wanted to like it a lot more. I was expecting to like it a lot more than I did, and it was just tough. It was a sad surprise for sure. So these are some very popular books that I actually think are not worth the hype. Again, The Night and Gale and The 7-Year Slip, I did enjoy those books. I just don't think that they are as good as everybody says they are, not even close in my opinion. And then the other 3 books I actually think are pretty bad books or have really bad endings. Not my favorite at all. I would love to know if you have any opinions on these books, if you've read them, if you feel the same way as me or differently. I am open to discussion in the comments, so definitely leave your thoughts there. As always, thank you so much for watching and joining and hanging out with me on this corner of the internet, and we'll see you next time.